So, yeah, the Phillies are the arch nemesis.
Yep. Well, this should be good.
How are y'all?
What's baseball?
No.
It's football.
And
That's right.
and it's even baseball season, isn't it? They're still playing, aren't they?
Mhm.
They're still starting. They're just cranking up.
Okay. So this is Hosanna. This is
Hi,
Bethany.
Hosanna.
They're both juniors. They both have one more year. Bethany was just with us in Kenya, and so saw some of the fruits of the 410 bridge.
Good.
Hope going back to Kenya this summer, and open to continuing in ministry in Africa beyond that. Hosanna's getting married this summer, and still has a year of school, and then moving near Canada to run a family farm, some agritainment, some corn mazes and things like that. So
Good. Nice.
yeah,
Nice. Well,
that's us.
congratulations. Congratulations, Hosanna. Bethany, give me a 30-word synopsis of your trip to Kenya.
It was so good. I loved it. I loved the people and just their joy and just spending time with them.
Good. Good. And you said, did I hear Paul right? You're going back this summer?
Yeah,
Are you going back with 410 or are you going back on your own?
I'm going back with, it's called Chariots for Hope.
Okay. All right.
It's like an orphanage. It's somewhere around there. I was talking to Shadrach about it and he's heard of it, but so he said it's somewhere around the area we were.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. And Hosanna, you said you're heading up to the Canadian border somewhere?
Yep. So my fiance and his family live they live on the other side of the river from Canada. So it's about 15 minutes to the first border crossing.
Okay. All right. Well, cool. Well, good, good, good. All right, Paul, what do we want to talk about here today?
Well, so what we did with this is their last class with me, sad as it may be. So we just tried to customize what they wanted to get out of it and learn from it. And so the first in January, they did a lot of internal work, personal leadership stuff, cultural intelligence, just kind of getting, reminded of who they are, self-assessment. And then each of them did kind of a cultural look at another country or Hosanna's place, the region in Quebec. And so now we're just kind of figuring out, okay, how do those things start to overlap, right? How do we take who we are and bring it into focus with what's going on in the world and what God's already doing and what the needs are. And so we heard from a business as mission guy last week. Next week, we'll start talking a little bit about, in 2 weeks, we'll start talking about short-term teams and trips. And so I just thought having you here would be really good, having been in business and moved into the nonprofit work and having been doing it for 15 years now in Kenya and Haiti, Uganda, Guatemala. Just wanted you to give some thoughts, maybe some of your own journey, and then some of kind of the good and the bad of what you've seen. When Americans with big hearts and good intentions try to get involved, sometimes that goes really well if they're really wise about it, and sometimes that goes horribly wrong in spite of their best intention. So just share with us some of your story and some of what you've seen in that regard.
All right, I could go for hours, and I know we're short on time and we have a finite amount of time. So I'll try to give you the abbreviated version. But like Paul said, I've come out of the business world. My career has always been somewhat entrepreneurial, really entrepreneurial. I mean, I feel like that's just a really nice way of saying that I realized early on in my career that I wasn't going to make a very good employee, and I needed to kind of do my own thing. And so I always did that, and left the business world. The last business I had here in Atlanta didn't survive 9/11, and no reason to go into all of that. But the down and dirty of it, again, the abbreviated version is that around that time, my business failed, and we were kind of in our family's dark times, a very difficult season of our lives. 3 kids at the time, making no money, no job. God laid in my heart that I was supposed to go to Uganda and build a school building for some kids in the middle of nowhere, Uganda, which is, again, without a whole lot of context, sounding probably really weird, like why would I entertain that at that time in my life? But my testimony is that when I realized that there was a difference between declaring Jesus Lord and allowing him to lord over your life, there's a difference between declaring him Lord and allowing him to lord over your life. When that chasm was crossed in my personal journey, I just said, look, give me the next right thing to go do, and I'll go do that. And I'll trust you with the results. And so I did that. And so that next right thing, weirdly, was to go build a school building for some kids in middle of nowhere, Uganda, in a place called Budalali. And through my raised some money, a little bit of money, enough for a school building and a water project and some other stuff going on over there, threw my kids and my wife on a plane, and we went over there for about 2.5 weeks. Without a church, without any kind of sending organization. It was just us. And thinking that we were going to make a change, really a generational change in that community. We were going to build a school building that generations of kids would use. There's going to be a permanent building with water project, all of that. And the reality was that one, what we were doing for that 2.5 weeks, after a few days, I realized was really of no moment. It made zero difference in the poverty problem, which was a surprise. And then two, we made every mistake in the book. In hindsight, I look back at what we did and how we did it with a fair bit of mortification. I'm mortified by some of the things that we did. And I just didn't know any better. And so I came back and I realized that there was just a much better way. I felt like there was a much better way, way more effective way to really no foolin' solve this poverty problem, this issue of extreme poverty. Became a bit of a student of it. Paul introduced me to a very small little thin book. That's when I met Paul. And it was a book by Daniel Rickett. And I think it was titled something like Making Your Cross-Cultural Strategic Partnerships Work or something like that. Real sexy title. But the words just jumped off the page to me. And I think that was kind of the mechanism for connection between Paul and I, or I'm sorry, Dr. McGinnis.
Oh, thank you.
I'll always know him as Paul. But anyway, and we, through again another series of events, I left my at that point I had to have a job, and lest I remind you that I don't make a very good employee. I hated that job and didn't like working for someone else. And I had a choice in my career. I had to go start another business with a guy in the healthcare space, or go do 410 Bridge. And I felt like God was leading me to do 410 Bridge. And so we raised a little bit of money, founded 410 Bridge in September of 2006. And really all around this idea of no fooling, solving the extreme poverty problem for a community. You got a chance to see a bit of that in Kenya. And yeah, that's kind of high level look at it. And you know, that was almost 16 years ago. And you know, we're now in 4 countries and probably done more wrong and gotten more wrong than we've gotten right over the years. But we, as you may have learned, Bethany, in Kenya, is that, you know, we do not define poverty as a material problem. We don't. It's way more than that, and we think it's an issue of worldview. And if we can help people shift their worldview from whatever it is today to a Christian biblical worldview, that where they know that God created them for a purpose, that you know, they're loved, they're forgiven, they should be forgivers, and they have responsibilities. Responsibilities as godly parents, godly spouses, godly business owners, godly teachers. We do all that in one place, and we can shift everyone's worldview to a Christian biblical worldview. What we've learned and seen is that they'll do more to solve their poverty problem without us than they will with us. And so that's kind of a 30,000 foot view of kind of the start. And yeah, so let me just kind of pause there and see if there's any questions, because that was a very abbreviated version of a very long story.
So you said you weren't sent by like a church or an organization. So how did you even get connected to Uganda? Like, how did that happen?
Our children at the time were going to a very small little Christian school here in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And again, during those dark times where I'm trying to figure out, you know, the grease fire, dumpster fire that is our lives at that time, they did a little project in their school for a ministry in Uganda. And I remember hearing about it at the dinner table, and it was little shoe boxes, putting a bunch of toys and school supplies and whatever in these boxes. And a family took them over there. They came back in my house, having dessert and coffee, showing us pictures of their trip to Uganda, and this school building popped up. They made out of mud and sticks and cow dung and dirt floor. Kids are sitting on rocks, no teacher, no supplies, no nothing. And I'm like, man, that just seems silly to me. Why don't they just build a permanent building? And yeah, so in my prayer time the next morning, I was really just negotiating with God, saying, you know, how he loves when we negotiate with him. You know, if you do this, then I'll do this. I said, if, you know, once I get my business on track and start making some money again and get all this debt paid off and get my kids back in private school and all of that, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to build them a brick building. And I was clearly convicted at that moment that I had it backward, that I should go serve him and his kingdom first. All this other nonsense and mess that is just brewing, he'll walk with me through that, but much of that is of my own making. And so serve him and his kingdom first. And that's what I did. So I just started to raise a little money and to go build that building. But that's how we got connected.
Cool.
So Paul said a little bit about, you know, when Americans go over there, we sometimes it's a beautiful thing and it's really effective, and other times, you know, it could just be another grease fire. And what I mentioned was, I think I said that I felt like, you know, we made every mistake in the book. I think we did. Completely unprepared, and, you know, the well-intended, thought we were going to make a huge difference, but we really had no idea. I had no idea. My family was just kind of following me, right? We threw them on a plane and let's go. Ready, fire, aim kind of a thing. And I think we just went over there with no idea what problem we were going to go solve. And I think as a business guy, it's astounding to me that I even had that perspective, because as a business guy, if you're going to go solve a problem, you better define it well. And if you don't define it well, you could be implementing solutions that solve a problem that is different than the problem that you think you're supposed to go solve. And that was the case here, where I may have been solving a infrastructure problem for school, but I was not solving an education problem. Certainly wasn't solving a poverty problem. Wasn't solving a water problem, even though there was going to be a little water project there. I was going over there with a heart to serve, and felt like I was going to help, but I really didn't have a strategy to go actually solve the problem that we were defining to solve. And I've seen that for so many times over the years here at 410, where the very mistakes that we made as a family. When we started 410, I immediately wanted to keep from making those mistakes again. But what I found is the biggest difference between the private sector and the nonprofit sector, the ministry sector, is this level of emotion that drives decisions. In the business world, while it's emotional, right? There's emotions everywhere. It is much more measurable. It's defined. It's structured, and you typically do not make strategic decisions based on emotion. Now, there's always exceptions to that, but in the ministry world, what I found almost immediately was emotion was driving all of the decisions for people who wanted to go help. And in the book that I told you that Paul introduced me to, there were a bunch of principles that I took out of that book that became our guiding principles, that were really meant to be guardrails for us not to move off mission. And one of those principles is we have to separate what we give and how we give it from our need to feel good about ourselves. We have to separate what we give and how we give it from our need to feel good about ourselves. And man, that is a big deal. And so over the years, I'll tell you a few stories. You know, I don't know that we went to Budalali as a family to go feel good about ourselves. I felt like I was doing what God was calling me to do, but I did feel good about myself. I felt, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, but I realized that that really trumped any of the actual results that we were trying to accomplish. Say hello to them, whoever that is. Say hi from Kurt. But over the years, for example, in Quabbin, Kenya, one of our first communities, a couple war stories for you. We built one of the first big infrastructure projects we did in this community called Quabbin, Kenya, was a health clinic. And it was a really nice health clinic, and it was had a little pharmacy and some, visitation rooms, administration block, and some housing nearby and all that. It was built to government standards by the community itself, and all that was well and good. And then we had a team of doctors come in from a church here in Atlanta. And when they arrived, they had come a long way, spent a lot of money, and they showed up at the clinic ready to see patients, and no one showed up. And or very few people showed up, and they were expecting lines of Kenyans lined up to see these great American doctors. And they learned that the reason that people weren't coming and just lining up was that the clinic was charging people to see the American doctors. They were charging for the drugs, and they were charging for the drugs, and a small fee to see the doctor. And the American doctors thought that was totally wrong, and created a big stir in the community and with the leaders, and demanded that the leaders tell the community that it was free, that they had come for free, and that the drugs were free. And all of a sudden that word got out, and there was a long line of people to come see these doctors. And at the end of the day, they had given away all the clinic's drugs. People had come for free healthcare. And I went to go and visit that community shortly thereafter, and the leaders sat me down and said, Kurt, you said that these projects have to be sustained by us. They have to be owned by us. They have to be operated by us. Yet your doctors come over here and they gave away all our drugs, and we have no money to replace the drugs. Is this your clinic, or is this our clinic? And I said, it's your clinic. And I apologized profusely. But a great example of emotion, wanting to feel good about ourselves, feeling like we're making a difference, and turning that lens on us as opposed to the people that we're actually going there to serve. That's a good example of it. Other examples real quick are, our church partners are often the reasons why we have to exit a community prematurely. They go over there a few times, they start thinking they know what's going on, and next thing you know, they hire a leader in the community to be their long-term missionary. They start doing a project outside of 410 and completely undermine this self-development model that we're trying to create in the community. And they've undermined our credibility and the leadership in the community, and we have to leave. Again, all driven by emotion, a need to feel good about what we're doing, as opposed to actually solving the problem of working ourselves out of a job so this community can continue their journey of development without us. And more often than not, the reason we have undermined relationships in our communities is because of Westerners coming in. And I'm afraid that, we were guilty as charged in that first trip. And I think once you know, and you have an opportunity to do something about it and change your strategy. But if you know and you don't, because you just continually want to feel good about ourselves, we're doing more harm than good. And that's what books like When Helping Hurts and Toxic Charity and Paul's book, Walk This Way, are all about. And so that's some examples of kind of, good intentions are not good enough. I'm just a big advocate of, and it's kind of my hot button, that all the damage that's being done by Westerners coming into the developing world, trying to solve a poverty problem and doing more to keep people dependent and entitled and in extreme poverty than they are actually to fix the problem. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions about that. Paul, am I on track here for you?
Yeah. What do you guys think? Any that resonate or raise any questions?
I thought the story of the doctors was really interesting. Do you think there's a balance between bringing in resources so that more people could be reached, but the clinic is still able to keep itself up and running? or like obviously like it's important for the clinic to be able to support itself, but like is there a balance of these people are here for a limited amount of time and there's a lot of people who are in need?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that in every place where we work, they need resources. Resources. There's a couple schools of thought on this. One school of thought is that you never want to provide. You want to be a low input organization, meaning the community should generate all the resources they need to solve their problems on their own. I don't buy that. It's nothing terribly invalid about that, but I don't buy that. I think that our resources can improve the pace and depth of the development that happens in the communities. Those resources, though, have to be driven by the community, not by us. If those doctors had come in, extreme example, and said, if we just serve one person and serve them well and let that person realize that we and our gifts that we've brought over here are an answered prayer to them, and we can get them to shift their worldview away from outsiders coming in and solving problems for them and really seeing it as, God's grace being administered to them, they would be successful, but they don't typically think that. We don't think that way as Americans. It's our money, our idea, therefore it should be our way. And we have to stand in that current and not let that sweep us downstream. And emotion is what allows us to sweep that downstream. So our communities need resources. We just have to subordinate, again, our ideas and our control of those resources and use those resources as a mechanism to improve the pace and depth of their development. And development is defined by what people do for themselves. This also came from the book Paul shared. That which people do for themselves, that's development. Not what outsiders do, but what they do on their own. And if we can help them do more on their own quicker, great. But that can be a very thin line. And sometimes, more often than not, we cross that line and we're actually doing more for them than with them. And when we cross that line, we're on the wrong path. We don't do anything for people, we are going to do with them. And it's hard because we, in our culture, have a sense of urgency, otherwise known as we're impatient. Again, we have the money and the idea, and therefore we think we should just get it done. And they don't have a lot over there, but they got a lot of time. And they're competent and they're capable. They're just different. It's just a different culture. And I think the cultural sensitivities are super important to understand before you go over there and start doing work. I get a lot of people that ask me, Kurt, just came back from a trip. Man, it was awesome. I want to go back over there and I want to serve long-term. I want to be a long-term missionary with 410 Bridge. And I'm like, okay, that's, we don't really do that. We have 100% indigenous staff, but if you want to walk alongside them in some way, my question is, what's your ministry? What are you looking to go do as a missionary? It can't just be hang out and be helpful. What's your strategy? What gap are you filling that they can't fill on their own? These are really hard questions because, again, and Bethany, you may be feeling this because you just came back, but when you go over there, man, it rocks your world in many ways, right? It's culturally, your synapses are just firing. It's remarkable. We got to take a breath and pause and say, look, what are my gifts? How do my gifts help the people that I want to go serve that are above and beyond or different than what they can go do on their own? If they can go do it on their own, how do I help them go do more of what they can do on their own, especially in a poverty context? How can I help them go do more on what they're doing on their own, rather than me coming in and supplanting what they were doing on their own? And all of a sudden, I take that responsibility on. To me, long-term. So we've never sent long-term missionaries into a 410 Bridge context, but there are places in the world for that. I think there are places in the unreached world, closed countries. There's no church, those types of things. Church planting is important, but in our context, you guys went to Tumu and there's a big, huge PCA church there, bunch of churches everywhere. We don't need to plant another church. What we need to do is advance the existing church, help them advance. And so, that's kind of the question that, I always kind of pose to folks that are looking to go long-term and say, like, well, what ministry are you looking to provide people? And it needs to be additive to what they can't necessarily do on their own. So. Questions, thoughts about that? No? Okay. So can I ask a question? I would ask, why did you guys, you two, I know Paul, but why did you all take this class? What's your, you're young people, you got your whole life ahead of you, clearly involved and interested in what God's doing globally. Why?
So I'm studying intercultural studies, and then I'm minoring in counseling. But I've wanted to be a missionary since I was 5. So I do want to do overseas missions. Yeah. So this summer, like with working in an orphanage, I'm excited to see like what doors the Lord opens through that. Because I really do love kids. So maybe like he's calling me to something like that. I don't really know. So yeah, that's why I'm in this class.
Well, that's interesting because that's the question you probably need to start asking yourself. Like,
Yep. Yeah, when you were talking, I was like, huh. So
yeah, spend some time in prayer and think about, well, what is it? It's more than just hanging out with kids.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes people get a little sideways when I say stuff like that because they get a little bit offended. Please don't be offended, but you got to ask yourself the hard question is like, what problem am I going over there to solve that they can't solve on their own? And if they can solve it on their own, how can I help them go do that on their own so they don't need me? Doesn't mean we don't have a relationship with people. Doesn't mean that we don't go over there temporarily or, short term. Relationships are important. But yeah. Hosanna, what about you? I can't hear you for some reason on the left. I don't know why. Maybe it's a direction.
Apparently, yeah, they couldn't hear me last time either. Is that better?
Much better.
So I'm in intercultural studies and accounting. And like different cultures have always really interested me. And I think more specifically right now, I've like learning how to communicate with people better. And a lot of that is just learning different cultures and understanding that everybody comes from a different perspective. And there's tons of cultures throughout the United States. So like you're always going to be having those people in your life who you have to learn how to communicate the way that they communicate. So that's my biggest interest.
Awesome. Okay.
The short answer, Kurt, is that it's a required class. That they didn't choose it. It chose them, simply because of the major that they're in, their desire to do intercultural studies. They just have to do this one.
Yeah, but I mean, you have an interest in the cross-cultural, exposure. You don't want to just, sit at home, right, and stay in your community, right? So that's good. That's good. Paul, what else can I share you think that would be helpful?
I guess I just want to, interesting, just even your conversation with Bethany and how sometimes it's not till we do the next right thing that God opens up what's next after that, right? Even your trip to Uganda, you knew that was what God was calling you to do. Everything you did there was wrong. And yet it was still, that was a pivotal moment, right? To get you on the right track. And so it's a tough tension to live in where, well, I didn't know what I would be doing when I sat in their shoes, 25 years ago. But I knew the next step. And so, yeah, Bethany and Hosanna need to wrestle with some of those big ultimate questions. But at the same time, well, I'm wrestling with that. I still will do the next right thing and see how God leads and how he opens up the doors beyond that.
And I think that's really, I mean, again, I think this whole do the next right thing kind of concept is sometimes misunderstood as the next big right thing. It's not. I mean, in times of conflict, uncertainty, disagreement, confusion, whatever, I mean, the next right thing to go do, just go do that. It's the next door that God opens, just walk through it. pick up the phone, have that next conversation, maybe just sit and be quiet and listen, right? Maybe be bold. It doesn't have to be a big, oh, I'm going to go to, I'm going to go move to Ecuador because that's the next right thing to do. No, it's a series of smaller steps to take. And I think it also, for me, the continually challenging lesson that I struggle with is, well, is this the next right thing that Kurt wants to go do? Or is this the next right thing that God's asking me to go do? And it requires some humility and some discernment and some counsel, some prayer, that where you can kind of separate, again, always being on guard about what I want to go do and how I want to go do it from my need to go feel good about what I'm doing. And yeah, so I mean, I think you got to have some humility, and sometimes the next right thing to go do is just pause and just say, hey, I need to think about this. I need to get some advice. For example, I just had a meeting just before this call, and it's about Haiti. We work in Haiti, and Haiti is a mess. I mean, Haiti is just a mess. It's a failed state these days. People can't visit. I haven't been there in well over a year. And I'm looking at what's going on, and really the question becomes, we can continue to go do certain things in our communities, given the kind of the state of affairs in Haiti. But the question is, can we be successful? And so when you start asking the question critically, can we be successful? Well, it all depends on how you define success. If success is defined as just continuing to do activity, well, yeah, you can be successful because your success is measured by how active you are. That's not how we're defining success. We're trying to solve a problem. And that problem that we're trying to solve is to have people in our communities solve their own problems long after we leave, because they think differently. They look internally to their community, not externally. Everything that's counter to the Haitian culture. And we've got to ask the question, and it takes some humility to ask the question, can we be successful there? Because if we answer that question, no, that then it's going to reflect on our organization and pride and ego and, well, what are people going to think? But at the end of the day, I really don't give a rip about all that. What I really care about is, are we solving a problem down there, or are we just going through the motions? I think one of the greatest lessons I learned was from a guy named Sidney Muisio. Paul, did you ever meet Sidney? I can't remember if I asked you this or not. But
Compassion in Kenya? Yeah.
Yeah. So Sidney is a Kenyan. He was the country director for Compassion International. And that's when I met him 15 years ago. And we became quick friends. And he moved up through Compassion's ranks, where now he's in Colorado Springs. He runs all of their global programs. He's a brilliant guy. He had polio when he was 2. And so he's handicapped. He could never play sports. He loved sports, could never play. And he said, Kurt, so I just took all my passion for sports and I put it into my intellect. And he did. And he's a smart guy, and I love the guy. But very early on, he told me 2 things that I thought that were just, again, defining for 410 Bridge. And one of them was, we're not going to be a process organization. We're going to be an outcomes-based organization. We're not going to be a process-based organization. We're going to be an outcomes-based organization. And that means that we can run all the programs in the world that we run in our communities. And if all we're doing is measuring how many programs we run in our communities and never measure, are we actually achieving the outcomes that we want, we're off track. We're measuring the wrong things. What outcome are you looking to see? What impact are you looking to see? And are the things that you're doing driving toward that impact, or are they just activities that you measure? For example, we have a business startup training. You may have seen or met some businesses over there. I don't know when you were over there, Bethany, but it's entrepreneurship training. And we originally, years ago, we used to have this metric of, if we could get 30% of the households in our communities to go through our business startup training, based on extrapolating kind of how their incomes rise, we are going to make the desired impact that we want. And so we were just desired impact of raising household incomes in our community. And so we were measuring how many people were going through our classes and our training. And that that was just wrong. And we got to, again, have some humility and objectivity to step back and go, that's wrong. That's measuring process. It's measuring activity. How many programs are running? Are we in fact, no fooling, raising household incomes on average in our communities? I don't care if it takes 10 BST classes, 1 BST class, or 100. Doesn't matter how much activity it takes. The outcome is what's important. And so that was a super critical philosophy, because I think that most organizations, most nonprofit organizations, are very content with continually running the same programs that they've run for years, and not really measuring the outcomes. So that's one. The other one, which was pivotal, was Sydney sat me down at dinner and he says, Kurt, do you really believe that the people 410 Bridge serves are the solution to their poverty problem? Do you really believe that? And, you know, because it was Sydney, I can't answer that question quickly. I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, no, I do. I'm not looking to solve anybody's problems. I think the greatest gift that we can give the poor is the ability and the mindset to recognize that they can go improve their lives without depending on outsiders. And so, yeah, I do believe that. And what we say now is that we don't see the poor as a set of problems to be solved. We see them as the solution. We don't see the poor as a set of problems to be solved, the water problem, an education problem, an economic problem. We see them as the solution to their poverty problem. And when you see them as a solution to their poverty problem, you no longer want to lead, you want them to lead, you're going to lead, they're going to lead, you're going to follow. And you no longer want to do for them, you want to do with them, because they're the solution. And I think those were defining principles that really guide us in all that we do, because when we get ahead of, when we start seeing ourselves as the solution, outsiders as the solution, we're, I think, potentially going to do more harm than good. And those were really important principles for us. So
I just thought of this, Kurt, and if you have other stuff you were hoping to share, because this might catch you off guard, but I'm just now thinking that kind of when we want to help the poor, when we want to get involved internationally, maybe I'm missing some, but it seems like our responses are one of three, right? We can send stuff, AKA the shoeboxes, which ironically your whole journey started with. We can go ourselves, right? Short-term trips, or organizations like yours and Compassion and World Vision, we could sponsor a child. So take just a couple minutes on each of those, and how would you grade those as far as their effectiveness in helping the poor? Shoeboxes, short-term trips, and sponsorship.
All right, I'll start with the first one, and I'll probably forget the third one by the time I get there, but I'll start with the first one and ask you to okay, so I said a little while ago, I think, Hosanna, you asked me the question about resources. They need our resources. They do. We can rapidly improve the pace and depth of the development. Again, development being defined what they do on their own by providing resources. I just think there's a big difference between resources and stuff. They don't need our stuff. They don't need our clothes. They don't need our shoes. They don't need our shoe boxes. They don't need our school supplies. That is all about helping us feel better about ourselves, helping some poor child or some poor person on the other side of the planet. They don't need our stuff. When you ask a parent, if you were to ask your parents when you were born, are either of you firstborn children?
I'm an only child, so sure.
Okay. Sure, first and last born. Yeah. What about you, Hosanna?
I'm the 13th.
13th. Oh my gosh. That's going to derail us. But anyway, so when your parents were first-time parents and somebody were to walk up to them and say, hey, congratulations, you're now a parent. Imagine for me, or explain to me what you hope for your children when they leave your household. They would never have said, well, man, I hope they have a bunch of stuff. I hope they just want for nothing. They would never have said that. What they would have said is, I hope they have a strong faith, character, a work ethic, hope they're honest. They would talk about all these character issues, all of these virtues that they would hope that their brand new baby child would have when they leave their house. But when it comes to the poor, for some reason, we think they need our stuff. And by the way, it's typically stuff that we don't want. And we feel like we're helping them in some way because we're shipping it over to them. They don't need our stuff. They don't need our shoe boxes. They don't need that. So I'll put that one at the bottom of the list. Doesn't mean they don't need resources. Resources aren't just financial resources. They're relational resources. They're spiritual resources. They're training. We are capacity builders. How do we help build the capacity of the poor so that they can sustain their development long after we leave? You're not going to do that by giving them their shoes and your clothes and whatever else you wanted to discard, and you're feeling good about yourself sending it over there. I got another story about that, but I don't have time to share it, unfortunately. All right, so that's number one. That's how I feel about the stuff. We don't want people giving anything away when they go on our trips. Nothing, not one thing. A Bible. We'll let them give a Bible away because we're not going to stop giving God's word out, but that's it. All right, number two, Paul, was what? Trips.
Short-term trips.
The big argument for short-term trips is, hey, if we just took all the money that the West spends on short-term trips and just sent it over there, we can make way bigger impact and have for the poor than by spending it on travel and all of that. I think while there's probably some truth in that, the truth in that is centered on when the trip is ineffective and poorly thought out. If we're just going as mission tourists, there's some truth in that. And so I am not a fan of that philosophy. I believe that short-term trips can be kingdom changers. And here's why. One is, if I didn't go and make all those mistakes at first time, 410 bridge may have not been launched. God didn't need me to do it. He could have done it if he wanted to go do it, but he chose me and he put me in a position to do it. And if I hadn't said yes to that decision, I don't know what the future would have held. I'm a strong advocate of short-term trips, but they have to be well done. And again, believe me, I don't think we are perfect. We get it more wrong than we get it right. Believe me, because people are involved. But when we go over there to solve a problem for people and not with people, we're on the wrong path. So we want people to go and engage relationally. We want our teams to be a catalyst for the community to understand that they can go do for themselves. We believe that we can help shift people's worldview over there while also helping them shift our worldview over here by connecting these two cultures together. And this transformation is not really this, it's really kind of this. I think there's amazing things that happen that way. We can't be successful in the work that we do overseas without support from the West. We need donors, we need people sponsoring kids, we need all of that. But we also can't be successful in the work that we do until we change the paradigm of how the West engages the poor. And so one of the ways that we do that is a short-term team. Come and see. You can watch all the videos and read all the books and look at the photos you want. But until you go over there and you smell it, you got to be on the ground, right? You got to be there and you see that people are image bearers and they can go do for themselves. And until you get that, you're always going to continue to have the old worldview that says we need to go do for the poor because they can't do for themselves. And anything that I do for the poor must be a good thing. I think that's false. So I'm a big fan of short-term trips. They just have to be done well. And I would also say that probably, I'll just say Paul hates it when I put a number out there. A large percentage of the short-term trips sent by a lot of organizations around the world are really poorly done. I just think they're really poorly done. And the third one was sponsoring a child. I'm a fan of sponsoring a child. It just depends on how you do it. In the 410 Bridge context, our child sponsorship program, and I would strongly urge you to sponsor a child and walk alongside that child on their journey of development. But our model is predicated on 100% of the children in our communities have to have an opportunity for a quality education, a quality primary school education, and a quality secondary school education. And so 100%, not just the sponsored few. So when you sponsor a 410 Bridge child, all of the kids going to that school are going to benefit because the quality of education is going to be lifted up in that school for all the students, not just the sponsored children. Lots of the other organizations have a one-to-one relationship with a child, but only that sponsored child benefits from that relationship. And I just feel like that's short-sighted. I'm a fan of compassion, but I think their model has some critical elements to it that are broken and then could be fixed. And so I'm a fan of that because it creates a relationship between someone suffering from or living in extreme poverty, and also a relationship between an extreme poverty person and a person that has poverty of affluence. And when you create that relationship, again, this happens and worldviews start shifting on both sides of the bridge. How does the Western worldview influence a Kenyan child, and how does that Kenyan child's circumstances and their journey impact the worldview of the West, where they see firsthand that this child is actually being lifted up and seen as the solution to their poverty problem, not a set of problems to be solved. And so I'm a big fan of sponsorship, but if that sponsorship program is sending food to that family or clothes or shoes or just creating a welfare system, I'm not a fan at all. The sponsorship program is merely a mechanism to provide resources to lift the quality of education in our context for all of the kids living in the community, while creating a one-to-one relationship where a Westerner can walk alongside, really behind that child as they walk on their journey.
Awesome, man. Kurt and I, how long have you been sponsoring Calvin?
Oh my gosh. I don't know, 7 or 8 years probably. I mean,
Okay, so we started sponsoring Lamech when he was 8, and he's 16 now. So that's been 8 years. And those two guys, Lamech and Calvin, they both came to visit me when we were there. That day we were working on the house, Bethany. They're both going to be seniors in high school. They both did great in elementary school, got into the same men's boarding school, and they start their senior year this month. And it's just amazing to have been on that journey with Lamech and you with Calvin, and just to see a lot of their motivation to do well is because they want to make us proud. They don't want this gift to go to waste, and so they're working hard, and they're busting it to see what's next and to make good of the investment that's been made in them.
So one story I'll share with you. I wrote this book and it'll be out this summer. And one of the things I want to do is go over there and interview people for stories and impact of the book. And I'll just share one story with you very quickly, because I think we're going to be up against time. But it's a young lady named Sophie Esther in Kew, which is a community in south of Nairobi. When she was in 5th grade, she came home and she realized that all the goats, all the chickens, all the cows were gone. She just kind of recognized that they had all been sold for her brothers to go to school. And she was the last born of 7 kids, and 6 brothers and her. And she realized she was not going to go to secondary school. And she told her mom, look, I'll just go to the local secondary school, which is a really lousy education. And I'm just going to get married. I'm going to have kids. I'm just going to continue the life of the girls in my community. And then in the 6th grade, she learned that the 410 Bridge was going to provide a secondary school sponsorship for the 2 best performers in that primary school. And so she committed to doing the hard work. And I said, well, what was a day like for you starting in 5th grade, 6th grade? She says, well, I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd do some chores around the house. I'd do a little homework. I'd walk 45 minutes to school. I'd help clean up the school. I'd help the teacher. I'd go to school till 5 o'clock. And then I'd do a little more homework at school, and I'd come home. I'd do more chores. I'd go to bed, have dinner, go to bed, and get up and do it again. Amen. Every day for 2 years. And I just committed that I was going to be the best performer in my school because I wanted that secondary school sponsorship. In grade 8, so that happened for 2 years. For grade 8, she went and took her standardized test, and she was 3rd in her school, in her class. 2 boys were ahead of her. And she went home and said, Mom, I didn't make it. I'm really upset. Just buy me a dress and I'll go to the secondary school, but I'm not going to go to a good secondary school. And 410 Bridge made a decision back then to sponsor not the first two, but the top performing girl and the top performing boy. So she was a top performing
Wow.
girl.
Hmm.
And somebody from 410 visited her home and gave her the news that she was going to secondary school. And interestingly enough, she said to me, she says, Kurt, when I realized that I was going to secondary school, I knew my community wouldn't think that I had deserved it. So I had to go to secondary school and do the hard work to be the best performing school student in that secondary school, because I wanted the community to know that I was worthy of the sponsorship. And so I did. And she finished secondary school, tops in her class. She's now a medical professional. And when I was meeting with her, I said, what would you tell other children in Q primary school today? She says, they have to do the hard work. Nobody's going to do the work for you. 410 Bridge did nothing but give me the opportunity to earn that sponsorship and earn my education. They can't learn for me. I had to do the hard work. And I got to tell you, that's about as good as it gets for me, because that's a worldview shift. When those students in these classes feel like the West is going to come in and sponsor them and do for them, and they could just kind of coast through school, mission not accomplished, right? They have to do the hard work. They have to think differently. They have to become leaders for the next generation in their community. And that's just a great example to me of what sponsorship does. You said it with Malik and you said it with Kelvin. They want to, one of the reasons they do well in school is because they want their sponsors to know that they're worthy of it. And they want to have their community know that they're worthy of that sponsorship, of that investment. So.
That's awesome, man. They're pounding down the door to get in here because the next class must be super exciting. But this has been great.
Great
Thank
meeting
you so much.
Thanks for inviting me to join you. I hope we found it informative. Thanks, Paul.
All right.
Thank you.
Y'all. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.